following clip has been taken from our 2024 Australian Army Flying Museum video with presenter Scott Downs. Follow the link in the description for the full tour.
So as the Vietnam conflict continued, the US Army and obviously the Australian Army, because they were involved there pretty heavily and had an aviation element there. But we started to look for the replacement aircraft, rotor-wheeling aircraft for the Sioux. Whilst it had done a great job in the early parts of the conflict and continued to do so into the mid-60s, it was starting to run out of steam. Basically, what had happened to the Mark III Oster, it was just getting so old, the technology in it was just running out of steam by that point. By 64, 65, the US Army is starting to put out feelers for its replacement. By 66, the actual requirement is put out, and two companies turn up with prototypes. The Hughes Company with the Hughes 500, and also known as Little Birds, and the Bell Company with the Kiowa. The 500 was called, in military parlance, was called the Cayuse, and I'll just take a little segue here, little explanation. Most people don't get it, but all US military helicopters, or Army helicopters for a better term, are named after North American Indian tribes, or Native American Indian tribes. So Apache, Black Hawk, Kiowa, Cayuse, Iroquois, and so forth. They're all named after Indian tribes. But I digress. So the two prototypes turn up and they can't split them. They have a fly-off and they still can't split them. And in the end, it comes down to price. And Hughes were selling theirs for, and I'm paraphrasing, let's say $500,000 a copy. And the Bell Company said, we can't make our helicopters for less than $1 million. And the US Army starts to buy the Cayuse, the Hughes 500. Within about 12 to 18 months, Hughes goes back to the US government, cap in hand, and says, we're undercutting ourselves so much. You're already committed to the airframe. We need to start charging you like $1.6 million for these aircraft. And the US government said, no, you don't, and turned immediately to the Bell Company, and they started buying Kiowa hand over fist. Luckily enough, Australia had delayed our procurement program of our replacement for the Sioux until 1970. And in 1970, we leased 6 Kiowas off the US Army and flew them 71, as part of the squadron in Vietnam. And they were a great success and they really sold themselves to the pilots. And by 1971, we had contracted to buy our first 50 Kiowas. We did that and we bought them as Meccano sets effectively. So they were built at the factory. The parts and so forth were put together into a box, for want of a better term, with a big picture of a helicopter on it, and sent out to Fisherman's Bend. And we built them here in Australia, but out of a carton effectively, and did a great job of them. Now we built ours to the civilian standard, the 206B1 standard. We built them to a higher standard than the OH-58 Kiowa. We put taller skids on and a couple of other small, very small modifications. And in 1972, we took delivery of the first one into defence. They were an enormous success straight away. They were loved by pilots, beloved by pilots, right through. And we flew them from 1971 until 2018. Unbelievably good value for money for the Australian taxpayer. Towards the end of their career, from about 2013 on, they were taken off the front line as a reconnaissance asset, because that's mainly their job, was to look out the window and find the enemy. They're taken off the front line as a reconnaissance asset as the new helicopter, the Eurocopter Tiger, started to take over that role. And they were put into a training role only. Now the Eurocopter Tiger has a really high-tech glass cockpit. It is enormously technologically advanced. And the Kiowa was 1960s technology, so it's all just dials and stuff. So as a training aircraft, the step up, the leap from that sort of analog 1960s technology to that high-tech digital technology in the Tiger was simply too large. And in 2013, a program was started to modify 13 of the old Kiowas into a half glass, half analog cockpit as a step up. So a pilot would learn how to fly and get his sort of stick skills up. He would learn how to fly on the Kiowa using the analog. He would then go into an analog and glass cockpit combination and start using that glass cockpit and not being overwhelmed by the amount of information that a glass cockpit basically forces you to take in. And that was a wonderful success as in that program. But by 2018, the aircraft were just simply getting, once again, running out of steam, getting too old. for a military aircraft. We took the 36 that we had left. We had crashed 14 of them over its almost 40 years of service. We took the 36 that we had left and effectively put them on the market, and we made money back. We're getting like $170,000, $180,000 for aircraft that were 40 years old because they've been so well maintained. They were such a great aircraft. And as we all know, the Jet Ranger, the civilian version of this, was everywhere in the 70s. It was Dick Smith's helicopter to go around the world in. It was the Channel 7 chopper. It was the Surf Life Saving chopper. This aircraft is one of the greatest aircraft ever built. It is a worldwide phenomenon, and it is still the best-selling medium weight, because that's what this size is called in the civvy world, medium weight helicopter in the world. It is still the top seller ever. It is an absolute phenomenon, this aircraft. So we brought that into service. But at the same time, the Cessna 180 was running out of steam as well.
For more of this 2024 Australian Army Flying Museum tour with presenter Scott Downs, follow the link in the description.